Welcome back, and thank you all for staying with us. Now, looking at events that happened on Thursday, the Ministry of Education released a timetable for the reopening of schools in a phased manner to enable the learners to make up for the 2020 academic year. According to the ministry's schedule, the learners will be reporting at different stages between March and June, and they will have from 8 to 14 weeks in which to cover whatever was left of the syllabus from the 2020 academic year. However, considering most of the non-candidate learners will have been out of school since March 2020, what is the likelihood that they will cover that much lost time in just a matter of time? And of course, what are some of the different strategies that the teachers and school administrators have to make in order to make the most out of the limited time? With us in studio, we have the General Secretary of the Uganda Private Teachers Union, Mr. Juma Muwamula. Welcome to Talk of the Nation tonight.
Thank you so much. Good evening, viewers.
What are your general thoughts on learners finally returning to school in terms of time frame, the 8 to 14 weeks that we have, and also the teachers? What is your general thought on that?
First of all, the general thought is to give us a hope of the future of Uganda, because we know that the future of Uganda is in the hands of especially the younger people who are still in school system. So because we have been under a lockdown and now we are seeing reopening, then we know that our future is getting to be cleared when we have the children into schools. But one true thing, you stated the fact that we are starting in a phased manner. I think it is in relationship to the guidelines of the scientists that have been given in relation to COVID. That phased reporting is supposed to enable a situation where learners are in schools in manageable numbers. Because when you look at it critically, at one time, right now as we speak, candidate classes are in school. But soon they will be joined by the semi-candidate classes. If you only added up that population, it is still small enough to be managed within the school environment. Later on, as those ones move out, other classes like Senior 1 and Senior 2 will then report to also do their work. But that is for purposes of managing COVID. But in reality, we are getting a bigger defect on our education system. Because as I may tell you, Sister Sandra, is that schooling or education, somebody learns first of all from the structured content that is given in class, but also from the environment. There are moments when we learn from our peers. So because our children are reporting to school at such a moment when others who probably could be their models, their peer influencers are not there, then definitely we shall have a shortage into what our children are learning at a time.
So it is a good move that we are returning to school, but there are different things that
it is a good move, but definitely we do have a big defect in the education of our children.
Well, talking about the 8 to 14 weeks that we have for the learners that will be returning to school in a phased manner, is it enough time to cover all the work that would have ideally been covered in a year?
Under normal circumstances, our terms normally have been running for about 3 months, normally under normal arrangement. This time around, we may look at the 8 weeks and imagine it's quite a longer time, but the fact is learners have been missing since we went into lockdown. So it is assumed that the content that they will have covered in a period of a year is going to be covered in these few weeks, as you have just stated. Most definitely that time cannot be enough. But you see, it is built on assumption that earlier when we were set into lockdown, there was a program for home learning, so homeschooling, and indeed the government provided some learning materials. I think some teachers, some of your television houses provided space for teachers to come and make appearances to teach and so on and so forth. But definitely that also has a problem, because as you know, it relates to our upbringing, how our children are brought up, especially in our environments. It is true that in many communities, children constitute part of the home labor. While children are at home, they expect to help with house chaos. Some of them are even engaged into home businesses. Therefore, imagining that these people have been concentrating on what is taught on TV can be a myth. So issues of discipline, issues of but also even the coverage or the possession of televisions, the possession of radios in our homes is equal another problem. We may imagine maybe around Kampala that a wide population perhaps have them. But you say education is for everybody in Uganda. And we do know that quite a large proportion within Uganda here do not have possessions of the televisions, may not have possessions of the radio stations, and therefore their children have been deprived of that program. Definitely talking about the 8 weeks now that we are going to report is not enough time, because even when we assume there has been home studying program, it has not been effective and all covering.
Well, the situation is here now, and we should now speak about the strategies to ensure that different stakeholders, the parents, the students, and also the teachers prepare best before the children get back to school. Speak to us on those. What should we be doing now before the students are taken back to school?
Of course, children have been away from school for quite some period of time, and most definitely they have acquired a lot of things that perhaps can be a problem in their schooling process. So as parents, we now have to get back to our role of nurturing our children. First of all, preparing them into a conscience that is ready to learn. Because while they were at large, some of them could have imagined that they have assumed the position of mature people who are self-governing, who are self-ruling, and so on and so forth. So we need to prepare them and indicate to them that now it is a season to go and get instructions from your learners. Therefore, get set, forget some of the routine that has been there before. We are aware that especially the girl children, many of them have gotten pregnant, and so many other things. So we then need to give them courage in the form of psychosocial support. But
so this is the time to say you've been, staying at the shop from about 8 to 5.
You have been on the street vending bogoya or whatever, and now study. Please let that go.
Yes.
It is time to appear in class and give it all your due attention and concentration. But also, it will not only go to the children who are going to school. It also requires to be put, the same emphasis need to be put to the teachers who are going to teach the learners. As you are aware, teachers have also been distressed for this period of time, especially those in private schools. When they were away from schools, lockdown came and they were not getting any salaries. Many of them really lived a very unpredictable kind of life. So they equally need to be prepared to accept the learners, to accept those hardships we just went through, and get set now for the business. It cannot be normal business, especially at this stage, but going forward, I know things will get back to the normal situation.
You're speaking of the issues that some of the teachers have, and we want to dive into those a bit further. As most of the talk that we've had has been about learners getting back to school, but the aspect of teachers also needing to be mentally prepared to get back to school. Talk to us about that.
Definitely that one I've already talked about, and very particularly teachers in private schools, because we do have the colleagues in government schools. For those, the situation has been nearly the same, except that they were not in schools. But for those working with the private schools, since lockdown, many of the school proprietors also cut on the salaries to their staff. So that sent teachers at home without any source of income. And we have seen stories, especially from your media houses, giving us how deplorable teachers are living out there. Some of them were engaged into very petty cases, very petty engagements that definitely compromise their profession. So therefore, they need to be prepared. But unfortunately, our government doesn't even have such a program to rehabilitate, to reorient. The other thing actually is reorienting, because as you note, in school, learners have a predefined curriculum within which a certain content must be covered. But now we have lost time, and yet we expected that that content should be covered for a person maybe in P6, for a person at senior 5, it should have covered up to this level. Now it is going to pose a very big challenge to a teacher who imagines that by the time I sanction somebody to leave senior 5 and go to senior 6, he must have covered up to this time. But you do not have the time to be able to cover all that much. It requires that a teacher must be retrained, re-equipped to see how either to compress that content that should have been covered in a longer period, or even how to summarize it up. Otherwise, we are going to have a lot of problem when eventually we are producing a breed that has finished P7, a breed that has finished senior 4, when actually they lack much of what should have been learnt within the stage of O-level, or within the stage of primary, or within the stage of HSC. Okay,
as we move ahead and we come to the end of our conversation this evening, just share with us your thoughts on how better we can handle 2021 academic year.
2021 as academic year, I think the most best way is to have a stakeholders engagement. The problem this government has always been having is to imagine that they can do the job that relates to education by a loner kind of approach. Even these schedules we are talking about is largely a pronouncement of Mr. Kakoza as a permanent secretary and a few of his henchmen within the ministry. That poses a problem. But there must be deliberate efforts where there is effective consultation. When you talk about teachers, bring on board teachers' voices that can have a reflection on some things that relate to them. Similarly, if we are talking about education, you cannot put forward policies lonely without participation of teachers, without parents' voices and other key stakeholders. Therefore, defining a better future for 2021 is effective engagement of all players in the sector.
All right, thank you so much, Juma Muwamula, who is the General Secretary of the Uganda Private Teachers Union, speaking to us about the phased reopening of schools for the non-candidate learners. Thank you all for joining us on NTV Talk of the Nation. NTV Weekend Edition will continue shortly.